Good evening and wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Witness with Wahid, and I thank you so much for welcoming me into your lives and into your sitting rooms. And as I keep saying on this program, this is a program of awareness. And as usual, I have with me a guest whom you all know. But before I introduce my guest to you, who is no stranger to you, by the way, allow me to just come up with this disclaimer that sometimes some of the questions I ask on this program would be in keeping with what some people would call the devil's advocate kind of question. Don't mind me at all, because the intention is always clean, it's always pure, it's for your enlightenment and mine as well. So with that spirit in mind, allow me to introduce an old friend whom all of you know, Abu Amin Bilal Phillips. He has been here on this program more than one occasion, and he's been enlightening us and sharing with us his views and his delicate enlightenment on even the slightest thing that sometimes eludes us, as you found in the last program. And tonight I have for him a very, very beautiful subject called freedom in Islam. So, your friend is here with you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam, and welcome back. And it's always such a delicious pleasure to have you on board. And tonight we have, as I said, the topic of freedom in Islam. And this takes me to the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Some people, they always come up with these beautiful letters, UDHR, they call it. And when they came up with it, the first thing I noticed when I did my homework before I came to you, so I always do that, was it was in the beginning a non-binding resolution. But it has over the years almost become customary law. And then some say that it's required for peace in this world. Before we go any further, your reactions to that?
Well, human beings have set up councils and made agreements in various times, various places. Even in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's time, they had what was known as Hilful Fudul, where the people of Quraysh, they got together. They were pagans, and they got together, and the Prophet ﷺ had attended this gathering, where they were seeking to preserve the rights and to protect the rights of the weak and the poor and so on and so on. And the Prophet ﷺ had said that if they got together again, this is now after he had become a prophet, he said, I would attend it again.
Again.
Yes. So I think this is just a natural part of human societies, human beings' desire to have a peaceful way of life, to live peaceably or peacefully with each other.
Exactly. And in that spirit, they say that there are certain things called basic rights. One of them being the right to life. That no human being has the right to take away the life of another. Your reaction?
Well, in Islam, when they speak about maqasid al-sharia, or the higher goals of the Sharia or Islamic law, the first one that is mentioned is also the protection of human life.
Yes.
That's the right to life. But to add that no one has the right to take that life, this is where now we differ. We say the right to life, your life to be protected, that it not be taken, as is mentioned in Quran, without just cause. So where there is just cause, then yes, your life may be taken. So this is an area, which I think evolved in the West with their turn away from what they call capital punishment, physical punishments in the penal system, as they turned away from it and towards what they called reformation, We want to reform the prisoner as opposed to punishing him in jail. He is a product of our society. We caused him to be what he is. So the blame was now shifted from the criminal to the system. So criminals now would have, nice suites with television, food without having to work for it. And the state now had to pay for the criminality of the criminal. And of course it failed. In the end, they now admit openly that this approach to reformation is a failure. Their jails are getting overrun. They're having to build more and more. In the UK, they've even brought big ships out in the sea where they're taking the criminals, putting them on, because they've run out of space in the, others want to sell the right to maintain the prisoners to the private corporations, make it a business. This is insane.
I remember watching a strange movie like that, but that's neither here nor there, because the next one they say is freedom from torture. And torture as a means of, and this is almost a direct quote, as a means of re-education, as you said. Punishment is equated with torture.
Well, yeah, this is part of their view. Corporal punishment, they call it, corporal punishment, because they used to lash people, whip them, and these other kinds of things. They stopped all of that. With the 20th century, when they the turn of the century, they stopped that.
There was a time when they had almost perfected to an art the tradition of the whipping post, as it were. And this is a complete about change.
Flogging, yeah, it was well known. It had been carried on for hundreds and hundreds of years.
The next one is freedom from slavery. So no human being should be enslaved by another. Your reaction?
From the Muslim perspective, Islam agrees with that. We should not enslave anyone who is a free person. A person who is already free, the society to make that person a slave is illegal from the Islamic perspective.
Wonderful.
But we also have to say that in a time or in a place where slavery already exists, where in wars the enemy is enslaving the Muslim population, then Islam does allow the supreme ruler, the caliph of the Muslims, to declare servitude for the prisoners of war that are taken from the enemy. There is that point that remains. But of course, those that are taken are governed by special rules. They are not treated as they are traditionally been treated in other societies, in that their freedom can be bought. They are not the person who is in charge of them. You could say the slave master, although we don't like to use that term. Even the Prophet ﷺ forbade referring to a person who was in that state as my slave. He said not to call them abdi, better you call them my young man. Don't call them my slave, because we are slaves to Allah alone, ultimately. So in that particular state of bondage, we could call it, Islam does allow it as a means of integrating captured civilians or captured populations into the Islamic State.
But then given time, eventually they would be free.
Yes. And this is where it is happening from that side. But where most human beings have agreed to end it, so it should be nowhere. This is a signed agreement. Nobody has the authority now to come along and say, as is being claimed by ISIS in Iraq, to claim now we have the right to capture Muslims and enslave them because they were from the other party. They didn't make allegiance to us, so now we are free to do anything with you, kill you, enslave you, any of these kinds of things. This is not acceptable.
That's not acceptable, is it?
Not acceptable.
Not acceptable at all. How about the right to fair trial?
That's a given in Islam, because the whole judicial process should be a fair process. And what Islam has done to ensure fairness, that it is not left up to a jury of your peers.
Mm-hmm.
You have been accused of murder. 12 jurors chosen at random from the society can now decide whether you live or die. This is looked at as a fair system, but from the Islamic perspective, no. We don't look at that as a fair system, because so much depends on the whims of those people. A man had, a huge argument and fight with his wife the night before. He ends up a juror, and he's got blood in his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
He has no mercy. So he says, kill him.
Okay.
Execute him.
Absolutely.
He's driven by factors which have nothing to do with the case at hand. Or, as they were showing, that if a white person was tried for the same crime as a black person, murder, the likelihood of the white person getting away was like 50% more than that of the black person for the same crime.
Very, very interesting statistics.
So this is
But
what...
Sir, we will take a short break. On that very, very interesting note, we'll leave our audience with a little bit of suspense. Ladies and gentlemen, do bear with us. We'll be back after a very, very short break. Thank you for your patience, which itself is a virtue.
Corruption ಹುಟ್ಟುಮ ಕುರವೆ ಎಮ್ಮೆ ಬೊಡು ಮಸೆಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾಲೂಮಾತ್ ಹೋದುಂ ಮಾಲೂಮಾತ್ ಹೋದಾ ಲಿಬಿಗತುಮಗೆ ಹಗ್ಗುವೆ ಕಾನೂನು ಎಕಂವಣಿ ಕಶವರ ಕೊದ್ದೀಫಾ
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience. And we are back with Witness with Wahid. And when we finished, when we took that little break, we were talking about trial by jury. Sir, your floor.
So, as we said, the trial by jury, which is looked at as being fair, from the Islamic perspective,
But it's got its
not
intrinsic
fair.
problems.
Yes. It's got, because it's left up to other humans. Humans were not specialists, etc. So from the Islamic perspective, we have, a tribunal of judges who are specialists in the law. Mm-hmm. It's not left up to one person to make this decision, but a group who are specialists, who can look at the evidence, etc. And we will not take your life unless we have absolute certainty that you did it. We will not accept circumstantial evidence. Your blood was on the weapon. Mm-hmm. Your fingerprint was here. These are all circumstantial things. So on the basis of that, we think it's likely you will jail you. Mm-hmm. We might flog you,
okay,
but we won't take your life.
Right. And it has to be absolutely certain.
Yes.
And that's the right to a fair trial.
Yes, that's the fairness.
How about freedom of speech?
Freedom of speech, of course, always has its limits. The countries that claim the most freedom of speech, if you say anything about Jews, the Holocaust, mm-hmm. you will see what happens to freedom of speech at that time. You've just lost it. But it's okay to say anything about Muslims, or say anything about, and they say this is freedom of speech. We can draw cartoons about your prophet. We can, even draw cartoons about God. And, this is our freedom of expression.
Recently, I was actually right in the middle of this incident where somebody had to tell me on the internet that there should be no censorship at all. My response to that was, okay, that's beautiful, but why don't you go and say what you want to say in front of your parents first, and if you feel that you can do it, then come and say it to me. Is that what Islam says?
That is the spirit.
Mm-hmm.
That is the spirit. But your relationship with your parents may not be that good.
Oh, I
and
see.
you might be willing to say things that are not acceptable. You know?
No.
So we wouldn't make that the criterion. I mean, what we're saying is that, you know, we are responsible for our words.
Okay.
You know, where our words can harm other people, where they, you know, degrade other people, we shouldn't be free to do that. We should have limits, you know, to make false witness. I mean, if we said so-and-so, you know, committed fornication, and we don't have the witnesses, according to Islamic law, you know, you'll be punished. You'll get your 80 lashes.
Okay.
You know, so you're not free to say anything you want to say. If it is the truth and you have evidence to back it and it's in a court of law, it is not backbiting, it's not slander, it's not, you know, behind closed doors, no, then it is permissible, you have the freedom, but the freedom always must stay within certain bounds.
For everything, there are limits.
Yes.
And here comes a beautiful one, and this is where I come up with my horns, you know, the devil's advocate kind of thing, for the sake of the argument. Freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom to choose, even faith.
As a general principle, Islam is perfectly fine with that.
Beautiful.
You know, Islam says there's no compulsion in religion.
Like
that is, there's no compulsion in joining the religion. But once you're in the religion and you're within the Islamic State, then it is not acceptable for you to openly declare your rejection of faith for the protection of the state, because we don't separate between
let me pick on that word here, with your permission, to openly declare.
yes. What you do privately, what you feel in your heart, that's your business.
That's between
we will
you
not
and God.
set up we will not set up inquisition courts to go and find out what is actually in your heart.
We would not go into that Spanish Inquisition thing.
No.
No, we wouldn't.
We don't have that. We never had it in our history.
And thank God for that.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Freedom of movement, free to move wherever you want, across borders if necessary.
That's how the Islamic State was. You know, you were
Was?
free to go anywhere.
He said was.
Was because our countries have now been broken up into bits and pieces, divided up, fragmented, and so movement now across borders requires passports and all these other kinds of things. But in the time of the Ottoman Empire and before that, the Abbasids and the Umayyads, the Islamic State was open. Muslims could travel from any part to the other. There was no restriction in terms of movement.
And this is what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, that you should be free to move. There are a whole heap of others, if I may go into them. One of them being the right to bear arms.
Yes, I mean, Islam allows and encourages all Muslims to be physically prepared to defend themselves, their families, their communities, their state, if and when the circumstance arises. That may require bearing arms, or it may be done through the media. That right should be preserved.
And here's another delicate area, gender identity. Should you be free to choose your gender?
From the Islamic perspective, no. You are who you are. The distinction between male and female, Islam emphasizes it. You, as a man, should not dress as a woman. With so cross-dressing, you know, transvestites and all this are out the door in the Islamic State. If you do it behind closed doors in your house, okay, nobody's coming to, you know, peek in your window and find out what you're doing. But
No
you know,
peeking
not
in
in
the
public.
closet. No peeking in the closet.
Yeah. This is not in public. This is the point. You know, similarly, a woman is not supposed to dress like a man. You know, the distinctions between male and female should be maintained, should be clear, because once you start to blur the differences between the two, then you're promoting homosexuality, lesbianism, and all these other, you know, evils.
A can of worms opens up.
Yes.
Reproductive rights.
From the Islamic perspective, again, you know, reproductive rights has their limits. That if it is an issue of abortion, because you're saying reproductive rights, I mean the right to reproduce, whether you have a child or not have a child, meaning you're pregnant and you can decide not to have that child live, then that is not your right. You know, Islam is against abortion. It's against, you know, killing the living child within the womb of the
How about
mother.
a family deciding how many children they would have or not have?
That is optional, yes. They can make that choice. They can avoid conception. And also, you know, reproductive rights, we could say, could include issues of rent a womb. You know?
Surrogate mothers.
Surrogate motherhood. From the Islamic perspective, the only formula for in vitro fertilization and you know, delivery involves the sperm of the husband with the ovum of the wife in the womb of the wife. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. Any other form is not allowed.
I see.
Somebody else's sperm because you are sterile, not acceptable. Somebody else's ovum because your wife is sterile, not acceptable.
And the surrogate womb?
Putting that in the womb of your mother or your sister or your daughter, not acceptable Islamically. Because the womb, the child that develops in that womb is a child of that womb.
I see.
It's not your parent. It's not the husband and wife anymore. It becomes a child of that womb because it attaches itself to the womb. It is fed by the blood from the blood of the mother. Its whole development and everything is from that mother. It's not from the. It's not from the owner of the
DNA.
Yeah.
As it were.
Yeah.
And a final one, freedom to trade.
Of course, this is necessary, freedom to trade.
In anything
but
and
not
everything?
in anything and everything, right, exactly. I mean, it's freedom to trade within what is permissible, what is wholesome, what is beneficial, or those things which are harmful to society, etc. Then no. We don't allow people to sell alcohol, to sell drugs, to sell, you know, anything else which involves harm to the society,
Goods
harm to
or
the environment.
services. Goods or services.
Yes, goods or services.
Exactly. So in other words, freedom within limits.
Exactly. The question is, who sets the limits?
Exactly. Who does?
For us, God sets the limits. Islam has set the limits. God and his messengers have set the limits.
And the final question on that way, why the limits?
Well, the limits are to protect the society, the individuals from excess, which becomes harmful. When people go beyond the limits, they've gone to extremes.
And on the road to self-destruction, finally.
That's the consequence.
Exactly. And you know what, sir? Once
Time's
again,
up.
we have reached that place. Yes, time is up and we have so much to say, but not enough time to do it in. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this episode as well, and we have so much to speak, but then we'll have to leave it for another time. Once again, thank you so much for making both of us part of your evening. We're so, so grateful. May God reward you for that. God bless you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.